So we're going to start slip slapping our canvas for our dandelion picture. So I'm going to start, I've base coated my canvas in aloe. I'm going to start over on the left side. I'm using a 1/2 inch or number 12 flat shader, and I'm just going to begin with bleach sand. And I'm applying a quick coat here in a section. And then I'm going to pick up blush pink on the dirty brush, and I'm going to work my way back into the bleach sand. Nice and soft. You can see how if I press hard, I'm going to pick up these marks in the background. And I don't want to dig out a section here. So okay. So I'm slip slapping nice and soft, working the blush pink right into my bleach sand. I can pick up bleach sand and create more light sections as I go. My brush is moist but not wet. I've wet it and blotted off on a paper towel. So I'll continue going back into more pink as I work away from the section. And I'll create the pink coming all the way, cresting that bleach sand. Now I'm going to go into aloe. That's the color we based the canvas in to start with. Sometimes we work wet on wet, and right now the canvas is dry. We had base coated it. This way, if I wet coat it, the aloe is going to choke out more of the pink and the bleach sand than I want. So I'm just working those two together, pink and aloe, picking up more pink as I need it. I don't want to lose all of that pink. I like to bring a little of the aloe into the pink. I can even bring a little up into the bleach sand area. Pink, aloe. Work my way. Everybody's going to have a different amount of color they want to see, but we want the light, soft pink colors coming from the left top. And then I go into thicket. So I'm working the wet thicket back to fade into the aloe, even again a little into the pink. If my brush becomes dry, I'll wet it, blot it on my toweling, and back in again. Your brush, if it's too dry, it won't soften and blend your colors together. And a lot of times, it's a great idea to have just a damp brush. So I'll just show you here. I could have a damp brush sitting here. It's dried off, only damp. I can just take that brush and nice and softly blend where I might end up with a dry patch showing. But that's just a clean brush that's just dampened and dried on my paper towel, or on my, I actually use an old towel. And we nice and softly blend these colors together. So you can see how my color is carrying over. I'm going to bring my thicket all the way up into my aloe. So if my aloe's dried there, whoops, I'm just going to grab a little more aloe, work it into it so that we're seeing a little more of the graduation of the colors. Again, if I get, see here, I'm going to get some dry patches. I kind of did a bit just to show you. Wipe, clean my damp brush, using that damp brush. and it's damp. If it's wet, that's an issue again. So nice and soft, just blend those colors, work my way over. And then I'm gonna, out of the blue, grab a little bit of medium Hauser and just work. I'm gonna moisten my brush again, it's too dry. And work a little of that medium Hauser so that it's nice and soft. There's just a little bit of a sharper green in here. Just giving the indication that there's a little something happening in the background. Back to my thicket. And the aloe. Working those two together. And then even over here, you can choose maybe a little more pink. Everybody's going to want a different look. And you're going to see when you look at the finished piece what you might like to see. Again, my damp brush. Just to soften that. Thicket. And now we're going into black green. Real harsh. We want the black green to be nice and strong. I want that black green to be my nice contrast here. I want to be able to see the light of the dandelion fluff showing up, and this is what's going to give us that. Nice and soft again. Anywhere I'm seeing I'm getting those little dry patches. You're still going to have some, but it's not a big issue. And again, it's really nice and strong and dark I want over here. I really want that black green to strengthen up. This is probably a little more the angle that I want this to be. But you see I'm doing X's. I'm not just sweeping like a sunset. I want to have direction in here. I want your eye not to be pulled one way or the other. I just want it to be working and blending the colors together. I can just apply some of the black green all along this edge here just to get a nice dark section here. Work the colors together. Nice and soft. Working those colors. You see how pretty they fade into each other, yet it's still giving me a nice dark contrast. They fade over. So I don't want it to end up with just one color on one side. So of course, once I get over into this area, I'm going to pick up, say, maybe a little of the medium Hauser and put a little of that in here. Just nice and soft. I think I'd like a little more of the black green up here. A little more of the depth. Wipe my brush. Work it into the thicket. And I'm going to put some pink up in there as well. Just like we did with the medium Hauser, how we're going to have that. Now I'm cleaning my brush because once you add a really dark color, it kind of makes it hard to continue blending because that dark wants to carry over further than you want. So I'll work it like that, nice and softly, blend those in, still allowing me to keep it fairly dark up there. Here's my soft, damp blending brush with no color. And we work those colors together. I'm liking the look of that, and now I need to get my pink. Remember I said I wanted to put a little of the blush pink in here? I'm going to take a little of the royal fuchsia too, because I want to see some pink in the background, implying that we've got some nice blooms and whatnot in behind in this garden. It's blurring out the garden is what we're doing here. It's in our background. We just want to have a little bit. So this is the royal fuchsia I'm working in here, getting a little of that strong pink in a few places. It looks really pretty in there. And this is your own design. You're gonna create your own background. And once you get going on this kind of a background, here's my soft damp brush. I'll just nice and soft blend where it's ended. You have to clean that damp brush every now and then too, though. And I think I could go for a little more of the medium Hauser back up in here. So do you see how it's just kind of, you know, when you see those photographs where the photographers have it all blurred out in the background, that's what we're doing here. We're blurring it out. You know there's stuff back there, and you know that something's happening there. And our little girl's going to cover a lot of this, but in the meantime, you create your nice background, and the best part you like is where you're going to put her. It's pretty near almost a guarantee. While you're creating your background, you might think, gee, I could put this pattern I really like on here, or I could put this on here. So there's lots of ideas of different things that can come from something like a background like this. Again, I'll just nice and soft. And you can always come back in afterwards and dry brush in a little bit of colors here and there too. So I kind of always tend to shade a little around my outer edges. And I'll just take a little of yellow and that. And a lot of times I just pick up a little of the colors that we've been blending together. If I see up here, I think, okay, well that little patch I want to cover nice and soft. I kind of just pick into those colors that we used. I think that's about the same up here too, so I'm liking that. Might want a little more of the medium Hauser. And I think here, a little chunk, and maybe a little up here. But the whole thing is this is still damp, wet with paint. When I say wet, work while it's wet, I don't mean water. I'm meaning wet paint. The moisture's in the paint. And you work while your paint is wet. So that's why I did a section at a time and I worked my way over. Now if I want to clean my brush out, I can see through up here where my light is. So if I want to kind of tone that a little bit, I don't want to have to work the whole thing all over again. I can take my bleach sand, come back and put a little bit more on top, because now it shouldn't dig holes in the aloe because I've got the other color underneath. And I can just go with the bleach sand and my blush pink. And you see how strong the blush pink looks there now because the bleach sand underneath it isn't as wet. So I'll just work those two together, but we still have that light section that it's coming from. Work them into each other. And here I go where I talked about you don't want to have to get into the whole thing again. That's what I'm pretty near doing. So you have to kind of know when to say when. I'll come from here and work into this. Just soften it out and drop my brush and back away from the picture. Come on now, Wendy, you can do it. All right, we'll be back later. Okay, so we're going to shade nice and soft down the right side. And then we're going to float medium Hauser down the left side. Just a nice soft float. And then you can take either the chisel of your brush or a liner, whichever you're more comfortable with, and just in a bit, I'm going to pull just a little fine aloe streak, just a little highlight. We're not planning on going right to the edge. You don't want to go right to the outside edge, and you're not right in the middle either. So it is more to the left, and then we'll blow dry. So we're going to take soft black and a 1/4 and chisel little tiny stamens for the middle of the dandelion. You don't want them to be too fat, so flatten your brush to a chisel. You can use your liner if you prefer, but I want it to be a little heavier in the middle so that it doesn't look like a spider. All right, I'm going to blow dry. So I'm going to take my dome stippler, pick up 3/8. I'm going to pick up bleach sand, scuff it off on my toweling, and then I'm going to dry brush. Nice and softly dry brush. And I want to leave a little section indicating where some of the little seedlings have flown off as she blows on them. So I'm leaving that little kind of pie-shaped section there. So we'll dry brush, a nice soft dry brush. I'd rather have to go back and add more than make it too strong. So I'm going to take warm white and bleach sand, and I'm going to mix them 1 to 1, thin them down nice and inky, and with my 10-0 liner, I'm going to take and begin to pull in these little stems. They don't all have to be straight in a row. You want them to, the odd one will overlap another because they're coming this direction, that direction. They're coming from everywhere. It's important not to have everything when you're doing something like this to start and stop at the same place. It's not my brush you're hearing, it's my hand, because I use my hand to hold the liner up off. So as I'm moving it, so once we get enough, and you can always go back and add a couple more too, if you feel like it. But once we get enough of these in, then I'm going to take my liner and I'm going to come through and I'm going to add little tiny curved pieces. So you see how they kind of curve. They're the little And I'll go through and do all of these. And we'll just continue all the way around and complete that. So you're going to take, and I can do this after I dry brush, so I'm going to take and dry brush now with some warm white. And you want to have a smaller brush so that you don't overpower it. So get a smaller brush handy. So I'm going to take the smaller one, scuff it off on my toweling, and I'm just going with warm white now. So I will re-dry brush back on top again. And it's more to the outer edges, like heavier to the outer edges. So it puffies it up again a bit more, and it's good to go off the edges a bit. Just get a little more fluff there. And then I'm going to come up nice and soft on these little pieces of fluff that have flown away. I added a bit more on this one because this guy's done up a little bit bigger. And I'll have a little more towards the middle as well. So once I've got that done, I'm going to take my 10-0 liner and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a couple more of just warm white, not with the bleach sand mix now. These ones are just the warm white. So just to pop up that white, and it's closer to us in this section, so we'll have more of the warm white here and just a couple as we're going around. Just a few towards the outer edges here, but more in this area right here. And that's how we finish off the dandelion. So we're going to begin with our 1/2 inch shader. And I'm going to start at the bottom section. Just take that a little bit off there. I'm doing this one on a box. So I'm starting at my bottom section, applying a little bit of milk chocolate. Then I'm going to pick up honey brown. Whoops. Not that. Watch where you're dipping. Okay, honey brown. And I'm going to work my way upwards. So now I want to work the milk chocolate and the honey brown together, back and forth, so that I just get a little bit of the lightened honey brown back here, but it's going to be predominantly darker. Trying to be gentle around the face. And I'll just work my way upwards. So I've got the lighter of the honey brown, work my way upwards again, slide my chisel down here towards the top, pick up the one I picked up earlier, it's my camel. I'm going to start at the top and work my way into the honey brown. We want to have a mottled look to this. You want to see the texture in the hat where it's got the colors going, but you're not looking for a very smooth blend, choppy. Just kind of gently work my way down. I'm not pressing very hard, I'm just kind of slapping those colors together. Work my way out to the outer edge. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of repeat that with the dark side. And then up on the top. Back to there. And my light again. Just pull that light along there and work my way back. Okay, that's that. So we're going to add our weaving look to our hat. So I'm going to start with my 1/2 inch double loading with, I'll double load my brush with burnt umber and milk chocolate. Flatten it to the chisel, and I'm just going to take and I'm going to slide my way upwards, not wanting to get too dark up near the top. I am not pressing hard. You see how I'm getting those little thin razory lines? Like there's a smidge of pressure so that it's not super fine. And I'm going to just reload again. As you're running out, flatten to the chisel. That's the important thing. And whenever I'm reloading, I would start back down at the bottom with my dark again, because it's going to be stronger. And I'll work my way upwards. And I'm going to do the very same up on the top. Just work my way up there. Give my brush a wipe. Now I'm going to double load in honey brown and milk chocolate. Honey brown and camel, pardon me. And I'm going to come from the top. And it's okay to go over the edge a little bit. This is going to give you a look of the weaving. And all I'm doing is just again sliding back. I may cover some of the lines that I had before, or I may not. It might be I'll hit and miss. I've got to reload again. Camel and honey brown. Again with the light up at the top. You can see my brush wasn't flattened as much there. So I'm going to work my way down. Come all the way down to the bottom, just fading off, leaving it darker down there at the direct bottom. And then I'll just reload, flatten, and I'll do the same up here. Just work my way down. We have to clean up this edge at the very end once we've done our shading on our face. So we just do all of those little lines, and that's good for that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to strengthen up the dark sections by shading. I'm going to use a 3/4 inch flat and side load in burnt umber. And I will nice and softly shade from the bottom upwards. And we want to have a nice shadow underneath the ribbon. Walk it out. You want to come nice and far down towards the bottom, keeping that our dark section. And you can soften that nice with a mop. Nice and soft. Soften that. I'll have a little more shading along here. I'm on that edge of the box, but you'll shade like that on your canvas or anything else that you're on. All right. So now we'll go to the ribbon, so we'll base our ribbon in Black Plum. So I'm going to wet coat basically the middle section of the band with black plum. Wipe my brush, and I'm going to pick up on the back, on the corner, and with that soft black towards the end, I'm going to chisel. So soft black from the bottom upwards. Wipe my brush. I'm now going to double load black plum and royal fuchsia. Flatten to the chisel, and I'll go along the top, apply the royal fuchsia upwards, and then with the brush on the chisel, I'll drag it downwards. There we go. And just chisel our way down. And this way it makes our band look like it's rippled. All right, that's it for that. So I'm going to take my 1/2 inch shader, side loaded, in my mix of warm beige and dried clay. And I'm going to nice and soft shade all the way down. And you want to walk that out nice and soft. So lean to the water part of the brush as you come away, and then use your mop and nicely soften. So I'm going to allow that to dry, and while that's drying, I'm going to come along with the same color, same brush, 1/2 inch, unless you're shrinking it down, nice and soft. Lean to the water part of my brush, walk it out, and also going to take, while I'm here, and shade in by the finger part. So we'll let that dry, and we'll come back and do an... Okay, so I'm now going to shade, not there, up the bottom of the hand, walking it out nice and far. And strengthening up that little section under there. Now, the end of her knuckles are going to have a bit of a shadow because they're bending over. And we're going to kind of want to indicate a little of the finger there. And I'll just soften that up. Now we'll move over to the face, and we're going to come along even with the bottom of the chin and float that. I'm also going to shade next to her collar. I'm going to shade on the bottom of her nose, creating a shadow on the nose. I'm going to let that dry. It's probably dry enough to come here. I can come right underneath the chin and shade the opposite right back. I'm going to give a quick blow dry. Get that little messy part I have there off. I'm going to give a quick blow dry, and I'll be right back. So I base coated my lips with the mixture, and then I'm going to side load my 1/4 flat with the lip mixture. And this top lip right here, whoops, I'm gonna have to turn it, sorry guys. I try to keep it heading the right way for you, but I'm just gonna nice and softly float a little bit to indicate that top lip. We don't have a real bold lip. It's mostly turned under because she's blowing. I'll just clean up that edge right there too. So we're going to add a bit more shading, but it always helps to have everything in place so you know where you're heading. I'll just clean that back a little bit. If you have your fix-it brush handy, that works perfect to clean that up for me. And I might put a little stronger float as that dries up on the tip of the lip. So the other shading that I'm talking about that we're going to do is I want to strengthen up the shading. There we go. Strengthen up the shading on underneath the lip. So I'm got my shading mix still. And I just want to strengthen up this little bit underneath that fades down to the chin, just to put a bit more shadow in there. And I might strengthen up that little bit on the nose, a wee bit. So what I want to do here is I'm going to bring in my highlight color, and I want to bring that in with a dry brush. So our highlight color is our light mocha. So I'm going to take light mocha, and you can even use a scruffy 1/4 lunar blender. Then I'm able, oops, sorry about that guys. I'm able to control and have my highlight nicely at the edge. So I can just highlight in here a little bit. Highlight a wee bit. I want to just pop up her nose a little bit. Brighten it in that little section there. And I'm going to highlight on her chin. Nice and soft, just bring a little bit of a highlight on her chin. And this really makes a nice difference here. It'll lighten the top of that lip. And I'm even going to take a little of this highlight. I'm going to go with, I may as well just go with my shading mix on the dirty brush, so that it's not going to be pure shading mix. It's going to end up being and I'll just dry brush a little of that out on the edge of her lip. Give a little of the glisten from the, because she's blowing. I'm going to take my 1/4-inch lunar blender and do some dry brush. So with a 1/4 inch, I'm going to dry brush some light mocha on the hand. We want to have our hand give us the impression that it's light up here on her fingers and a little bit of light here. Now, I am going to also do a little dry brushing with another. So hopefully you got a couple of these around. When we're sitting in class, we get to pass them around and share them. So we're going to take our 1/4 inch, and I'm using my shading mix. And I'm going to dry brush a little bit to almost give the look. It's kind of like almost a triangle here and along here on that part of the hand, and darken down here. Now we are going to darken our shading, so we will do that with the darker with the dry brush as well. And to do that, we take our shading mix, and I'm just going to take my shading mix and add a very tiny little bit. I just kind of brush mix it into it. The soft black. It's not a lot. It doesn't take much to deepen that. And I'm going to shade a little by the finger. This finger in particular, the bottom of that finger that's bent like that, really you want to have it nice and strong. A little here, a little here. So, and then down on the, at the cuff. Darken the cuff. Now, we're going to do a cheek, and we'll put a little kiss of the color for cheek on there as well. So I'm going to take my dry brush with where I did the skin color. I'm now going to take my dry brush with the shading mix and the little darkened tiny bit of the soft black. So I'm just getting a little of that on here. Scuff it off on my toweling. I can darken that little bit on her hand again. And I'll darken the bottom of her jaw. I don't know how much you're seeing that there. I always forget to move it up into the camera. All right. So that darkened the bottom of her jaw there. Now we do want to take some Terra Coral and give her a nice pretty cheek color. Now Terra Coral may turn out to be a bit too bright for her, so what we're going to do is I pick up Terra Coral on my dome stippler, I pick up some warm beige, our flesh tone color, I just stipple the two of them in there, scuff it off on my toweling really, really well. You don't want to have wet paint in there. Give it a twist, get that out of the center. And I just gonna give her a little nice kiss of cheek. Just a little kiss of coral on there. We can put a wee smidge there. And I'll put a little kiss of that cheek color right there on her hand too. Now I'm going to turn her, bring her face back into a line. I'm going to mix my shading color with a little thin bit of the soft black just to darken it enough, and then use my liner and thin it out. So I'll be right back. So I've mixed my mix, and it is just like, we're not talking a lot of soft black in there. We just want to just dirty the color a little bit, and we have to thin this down and make it nice and watery. So I'm making it nice and watery, and I'm just going to use a little fine line, add a little bit of a knuckle wrinkle there, and a little knuckle wrinkle in these lines. We want them to be just a hint, because what ends up happening with this is nobody's ever happy with these kinds of lines. So if you just see an indication in there of that, I think you'll be happier. I will take this as well. I'll just turn her head here a little bit, and I'm just going to just nice and fine with a line define her chin. Gently define the end of the nostril. I don't want it bold. We don't want that bold. I'm going to take my 1/4 inch, and I'm going to side load into a very tiny bit on the corner, blend it in good, of my light mocha, and just put a little, and I just press and blot, a little more of a highlight blot on that lip. And I can strengthen up where I dry brushed with that. A little bit there too. And pop that up a little bit more. The good old blot and blink with your finger. I'm going to take some of this darker that I haven't thinned down shading and strengthen at the top of the nose, next to her collar, and again next to the cuff on the hand. Just strengthen those up. Maybe even a bit where the hand turns there a bit. Or the finger turns, pardon me. And we're not looking for tons of darkened detail, but we just want to create more shadow. And I'm just going to enhance. I think I could take a little of the flesh tone and tone between these two. Might have a little bit too much of that highlight there. So I just dry brush that back in there. And of course I'm using the dry brush that I used for the light, so I'm not really being overly successful with that. I'm going to get a cleaner brush. All right, here's a clean guy. There, right between those two, just to tone that a bit. This my light mocha was lighter than I thought. The dry brush really softens it nicely between cheeks and whatnot. And then I'm going to strengthen my lining color, or my darkened shading color. And just nice and fine, do a loose, strengthen up this lining. And we'll be coming with our final shading on the face shortly.